everybody, and welcome to PT on Ice Daily Show Fitness Athlete Friday. My name is Christina Previtt. I am lead faculty for clinical management of the fitness athlete, pregnancy, and postpartum. It's an 8-week online course where we dive into how to help your athletes stay as active as they wish to be during their pregnancy and help them get back to being as active as they wish to be once their little one is born or their second or third or fourth little one is born. If you guys are interested in jumping into our next online cohort, we start on the 17th of March, I believe, as our next online. And if you guys are interested, it's always a ton of fun. All right, so the other part about me from an athletic perspective is that I am a weightlifter. So as I have a background in bodybuilding, powerlifting, and CrossFit, each of which I've done for several years, and then I've kind of landed on the world of weightlifting, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. I was a 64 kilo lifter, and I am currently on the path to moving up to a 71 kilo lifter. But having had exposure to all of these sports, it's been really interesting to compare and contrast certain aspects of each sport. And I've done previous podcasts looking at the sport of weightlifting and how it can be, one, it's very different from CrossFit, and then second, how it compare and contrasts to a sport like powerlifting, which a lot of people believe it's a very similar sport, and in some ways it is, but in other ways it is extremely different. And so I'm currently 4 weeks out from the Arnold's in Columbus, Ohio, competing as a 71. So I thought that I would do, instead of a pregnancy and postpartum podcast, something a little bit about weightlifting. So people sometimes think that competing or training in weightlifting can be boring because they think that all we do is snatch and clean and jerk and squat. And that is kind of true, but also not that true. And so I want to give you some things that you can work on with your CrossFit athletes that may be able to clean up certain biomechanical faults so that you can get people still training in different variations. So with all of the fitness athlete faculty and the modern management faculty, we always talk about coaching first. The nature of CrossFit is that you actually do not get a ton of exposure to the snatch and the clean and jerk just because there are so many things that you're trying to train and become proficient in. That's what makes CrossFit so fun. So because of that, you get exposed to probably 4 main variations of each lift. So you'll get a power snatch from the floor, a hang power snatch, a snatch, so a full snatch or a squat snatch, but a snatch, and a hang snatch, with the snatch variations assuming that you're going into a squat, and the power variations assuming that you're catching above parallel. And then the same 4 you're seeing mostly in CrossFit as well. So clean and jerk, clean or hang, clean and jerk, or just cleans, powers from the floor, powers from the hang, and then you can have a split jerk or a push jerk variation depending on what works most biomechanically for you and if you're barbell cycling. The other main difference between CrossFit and weightlifting is that the idea of cycling a barbell, especially of moderate to heavy weight, is fairly unique to CrossFit in that with triples or 5s or what have you from a rep range perspective, one, it would never really come into a Metcon in weightlifting other than like an EMOM, potentially when you're working on work capacity, and you would always reset at the bottom. So there's slight variations there. But the one thing about weightlifting is that we do a lot of work to clean up biomechanical faults using different variations of the movement so that they have different goals. So we're going to go through a couple of those today. So the first thing you're going to do with an athlete who's experiencing pain or is lacking proficiency in those movements is to coach first. But some of the biggest faults that we see, like a lack of lumbar stability off the floor, a too quick acceleration off the ground, a bumping of the weight in front of you, so you almost do a kettlebell swing of the weight, particularly of the snatch, and the press out, or probably the big 4, are things that we can use variations of the different lifts in order to be able to clean up some of those faults, and you can put them in with some of your athletes. So the first one is a cranking off the floor. So a lot of people think that they need to start to accelerate with the snatch and the clean right from the ground and start picking up speed as much as possible. That actually is not true. Most of the time, you are going to be able to deadlift more than you can snatch and clean. For majority of athletes, they're not going to be close. So it is not that you are not going to have the strength to pick it off the floor. The transition from the floor to the middle of the thigh is actually more of a placement. So you are picking up a little bit of speed, but really what you're trying to do is place yourself in a good advantage, that first pull into the middle of the thigh or the hip, in order for you to pick up a lot of speed as the bar goes from the top of the knee in towards the thigh or the hip for that turnover. If you start to pick up speed too early, you can almost gas out, and then all of a sudden you're not able to control where the bar is going, and you have lost that acceleration component in the point of the lift where you need it the most. So coming from the floor, if you have somebody who's kind of like grab it and rip it type of style off the ground, for a lot of my athletes, I'll start introducing tempo work. So what that would mean is I would do a clean or a snatch where I would tell them to tempo the first pull. Take it really slow off the ground, check your positions, and make sure that you're in the spot that you want to be. Oftentimes, particularly with the snatch, if you tempo the first pull, you can hit between 90 and 95% of your lifts, depending on the strength of your pull, with that type of variation. And so honestly, when I'm competing in weightlifting, I am thinking about tempoing the first pull, and as the weight gets progressively heavier, you're going to notice that even tempos, the speed is going to have to increase a little bit, but it is teaching patience off the floor to maintain the position of the bar. It also will allow you to really check to see if individuals are losing their chest or losing their low back, which can be a pain point. So particularly with the snatch, if you are having your hips rise too fast and your chest is low, you may begin to lack thoracic extension and your arms start to dump forward, which can cause everything to kind of go awry in the second pull, and it can cause pain overhead. And so doing that tempo pull, you can, one, make sure that positioning looks good. Two, you can make sure that you can do like form checks. And three, you can make sure that as you're bringing the bar in towards you, that you're in a good position, and then you can accelerate at the appropriate point in the lift. So first one is that kind of grip it and rip it fault that we can tend to see. So doing tempo variations is going to be really great. The second thing is that when people take a weight too fast off the floor, they can have their chest rise, or their chest come too low, their butt rise too fast, and they can really get out of position. And if your hips are too high, especially as you're transitioning into the second pull, it can cause the weight to really swing out in front of you. And so if that is happening, then the bar is going to be coming in front. You're going to be reaching your chest forward. You may have especially in the snatch, a little bit of an extra pressure on the front of the shoulder. It can become painful, etc., etc. So a way that we can use a weightlifting corrective in order to fix some of that or work towards fixing some of that is adding halting variation or pause variations. So the semantics that's used in weightlifting, you can use either a pause at the knee or a halting snatch, where the expectation is that you pause at different portions. And so if you are taking a look at an athlete's lift inside profile and you are seeing, okay, so as soon as they get to below the knee, their hips start to rise too quick and they turn into almost a tabletop instead of this nice, almost 45-degree angle, then we're going to get them to pause there. So you're going to almost do like a form check, and you're going to be pausing at that position and then continuing through the lift. So that form check is really great because, one, you're working on positional strength, because sometimes the reason why people's butts are coming up too fast is that they just don't have the strength in their upper back to maintain their position. And you're also being able to see, are shoulders still in front of the bar? Is chest and butt rising at the same time? Am I in a good position to start bringing the bar in towards me on the snatch or the clean in order to keep that nice and vertical bar path? So for those faults off the floor, the tempo and pause variations are all really great. So I remember when I first started CrossFit, one of the cues that I used to get from my coaches, which we know now sometimes doesn't translate well, is that you want to hit the bar like you want a baby, like that violent hip thrust that generally tends to, instead of thinking that the bar is coming up, that you're thinking that it's coming into this big loop around you, and then you can often catch it forward, it can fall forward, or it can go into this loop and come behind you, and then you're just not placing the bar in the right path. So a couple of ways that weightlifters use correctives in order to fix some of those faults. The first one is if the reason why is because you're not getting your elbows up. So once you make contact at the thigh or the hip, you want to think that your elbows are coming up. We don't want to do that early arm bend. We want that timing to be good. And then we can flip over. Sometimes what coaches will use is no hook variations. So when we think about lifting up the bar, we know that using a hook grip where we have the bar and we're hugging our thumb is going to increase force, and it's going to make some of the smaller grip muscles not be a limiting factor. It can also protect the bar from swinging out of your hand if it's coming too far in front of you. So if you use a no hook variation, you are forced to keep that bar nice and close because any swing in front of you and that bar is dropping. No hook variations are really tough and you're not going to be able to do as much, but it's a nice drill to really start working on keeping that bar nice and close. Another one that coaches will use a lot with their athletes in keeping that bar nice and close is using no feet variations. So I've talked about no feet variations when you're returning to weightlifting postpartum because it limits the impact. It also has to force you to complete your second pull because you're not getting that extra momentum where you're moving your feet from a jumping position to a squatting position in order for you to get underneath the bar. So when you're doing no feet variations, you really have to focus on that acceleration, that coming forward of the hip, but not thrusting, that's helping create momentum and the bar is coming up nice and close to your body. So using those variations can be really helpful because it allows the athlete to really focus on the positioning of the bar without thinking of the variables like moving their feet out, which can sometimes be problematic. So if you're getting that kettlebell swing in front, some of the things that we can work on that we've talked about so far is no hook variations, no feet variations, and the third one is talking about using high pulls. So when we're thinking about pulling off the ground, I always joke that I don't deadlift, I clean pull. And with weightlifters, we don't actually come with our hips forward. We finish at the top of the hip with our shoulders in front to mimic the position that you would want to be as you transition into the second pull where your hip accelerates the bar upwards. So you're thinking that you're keeping your shoulders in front. Other variations, other than working on that pulling strength, keeping those shoulders in front of the bar, is a high pull where you work on the timing from when the bar comes in contact with your leg to when you bring your elbows up to keep the bar nice and close for you to be able to transition underneath the bar. So if you have somebody who's bringing the bar really far in front, or if you have somebody who's an early arm bender, the high pulls can be great for positioning strength, and they can also be a really great variation to start working on the timing from the transition from the first to second pull. And so this can really clean up keeping the bar in front so that it doesn't crash on you. I've seen some AC joint issues because of crashing of the bar. I've seen popped SC joints because people don't stay in contact, which I have also done myself. I'm not saying that I'm completely exonerated for any of these things. I've probably done all of them, and that's why I know about all these variations. So you see people who have the bar crash on them, and that SC joint is like, it's swollen and inflamed, and that can sometimes be because of that loss of contact or the bar coming too far in front and crashing. So using a high pull gets positional strength that is really beneficial in order to work on that transition. So the stability fault off the floor, rushing it too much off the ground, working on tempos and pauses, looking at the swinging in front where you're having individuals who are having the bar deviate too far in front, which is causing it to land in front or loop too far behind. You can use, no hook, no feet, or high pull positions. So what about people that do like the soft elbows? So they catch and press. In weightlifting, that is actually an illegal lift. And so the press out is acceptable in CrossFit competition, but it's not acceptable in weightlifting. And so we do a lot of work to start really working on the drive and that acceleration under the bar on the snatch and the jerk. And ways that we can use correctives for helping our CrossFit athletes are using tall variations and using balance variations. So these are going to be definitely drill work. You're not going to be able to go very heavy on these, but they are working on starting on your toes. So basically at the very top of the second pull, and then dropping underneath the bar and being as locked out as quickly as you can. These are extremely difficult. I am terrible at them, but they have helped clean up my positioning a lot, to the point where now I very rarely will have a press out in the snatch or the jerk unless, something technically goes wrong in my heavier lifts. But definitely up until 95%, it is very rare for me to have a press out. And I really use these tall variations to reinforce that concept. So if you have a jerk, you're going to be on your toes, and then without rebending your knees, you are going to go into your split or go into your power jerk, and you are focusing on locking out your arms as quickly as you can to maintain that stability. You're gonna hold the brace just like you would for any other heavy lift, so that you're not letting your midline permeate or navigate too far forward or back. You wanna maintain that rigid midline, and you are driving under the bar really quickly. This is a great way for if you're in the rehab process and you are trying to work with an athlete who has pain with different weightlifting variations. The weight of a tall jerk or a tall snatch is going to be low just because of the nature of it. You're not getting any momentum at all. So it's a nice way for you to start working on getting that punch. Sometimes that active shoulder position where you're landing overhead is going to be the most painful or problematic for people, especially with anterior variations of shoulder pain. So it's a way for you to start getting that impact back in the shoulder under heavy or under light weights rather, and having an athlete feel like they're progressing back to full movement. And it's also going to clean up some of their movement patterns. So hopefully some of those soft shoulders, which can sometimes contribute to rotator cuff pathology, are not present anymore. The other thing that you can do is start working on balance variations. So snatch balance and jerk balance. So having the weight for a snatch balance behind you, doing a little dip and drive, and then you are pressing up very quickly and riding the bar down into an overhead squat. So different than when you're training the overhead squat, which is for positional strength, especially in the bottom of the snatch, which is why it's used in weightlifting. In CrossFit, it's its own separate movement. So you have to have proficiency in that movement for when it comes up in a strength or a workout component of your class. But for a snatch balance, you're really focusing on, one, can I lock out very quickly? Two, can I maintain that lockout and active upper back shoulder position as I drive into the bottom of the snatch, in this case, the overhead squat? And then can I maintain that as I stand up? And so oftentimes people can do a snatch balance that is at or slightly above their max snatch. So again, positional reinforcement, but also working on cleaning up any soft elbows that you're seeing in the bottom position of the snatch. Ditto for the jerk. You're starting in a half split if you're a split jerk athlete, and then going from there to very quickly, without doing any sort of rebend, moving your feet out into a further split position. Again, same thing, working on really quickly accelerating your elbows into that lockout position so that you don't get those soft elbows or those soft shoulders. So really thinking about really actively pressing up against the bar in towards the roof or the ceiling and trying to make sure that lockout happens quickly. So those are probably the biggest correctives that I will use. So kind of quick off the ground or hips coming up too fast, I'll use tempo or pause variations for form checks. If I have an athlete who is really moving the bar too far out in front or behind, then I'm going to be using no feet, no hook, or pull high pull variations of the snatch or the clean in order to reinforce positional strength and work on the timing of the first into the second pull. For individuals who tend to have really soft elbows on the catch that may or may not be contributing to rotator cuff pathology, I'm going to be working on tall variations where I'm coming up onto toes, driving under really quickly, which also reinforces positioning on the third pull. And I'm going to be working on balance variations, so snatch balance, jerk balance. And these are variations that you can use as technical drills before you work up to whatever your sets are for the day, or it can be something that you can use in isolation. So I hope you guys found that helpful. Oftentimes I like using these correctives for athletes who are also experiencing pain as a way to get them back into their sport earlier, even if their body isn't necessarily ready for the full lifts just yet. So it's a nice way to feel like you're doing work. The time that you spend in rehab mode, but really in technical drill mode, can do wonders in regards to rebuilding after an injury. And oftentimes my athletes will really see the benefit of sometimes having to take those couple weeks back, which is a huge bummer for them. But when they go back into the lifts, their foundation is just that much stronger. All right, guys, if you have any questions about that, I hope you found that helpful. You can post them in the comment below. Again, clinical management of the fitness athlete, pregnancy and postpartum. Our next course starts mid-March. So if you want to jump in and work on individuals who are with individuals who are pregnant or in the early postpartum period and want to return to exercise, this is the course for you. I teach it with Kelsey Valentine. All of our clinical management of the fitness athlete courses, essential foundations and advanced concepts are going to be starting up again in March. They fill up very quickly. So I encourage you to jump on to those online cohorts, or if you can catch a live course near you, I encourage you to do that as well. All right, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all in a couple weeks.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.